All right. Chapter 2, My Parents. My father was the perfect example of the three most important elements of fatherhood: preside, protect, and provide. My dad was such an example to me of integrity and taught more by example. Everything about the way he presided was an example of making good choices and being honest with yourself and others. I have a memory of him teaching this that still makes me cringe to this day. I was 19 and had enlisted in the military to avoid the draft. We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. When I was at the Missoula airport buying my tickets to San Francisco for boot camp, the woman waiting on me accidentally gave me the wrong change back. I had paid in cash and she returned an extra $50. I noticed this immediately and believed that I had an extra $50 due to her mistake. It was just a lucky day where I had benefited from another's error. When I returned home and walked into the kitchen, I was so excited to inform Dad of my good fortune. I will never forget the look on his face. He looked stunned, as if he didn't understand, and asked me to repeat what I had just told him. He then proceeded to sternly teach me how utterly dishonest that was. I suddenly had a realization of what I had done. I still sometimes remember this and can't believe to this day that what I had done, and that my initial feeling of good fortune, what my initial feeling of good fortune was, remembered in the look on his face, has stayed with me all these years. Another memory that still makes me smile in disbelief and yet is somewhat related to his role of protecting. My two friends and I got together one evening to see what was happening around our little town in St. Ignatius. It was Halloween, and beyond our years of trick-or-treating, we drove around town for a while. It was a very dead night, and we were bored to death. We spent some time in the malt shop having some burgers and listening to some new hits on the jukebox. It was about 11 p.m. and we decided to call it a night. We were in my friend Richard's Volkswagen that had a pull-back vinyl area in the roof. On my way home, we decided to stop at the nearest apple tree along the country road. There were apple trees all along the country road in Mission when I was growing up. The nearest apple tree was along the road near a farmer's house, an outbuilding. I still remember how good the apples were in late October, cold and still crisp and sweet. We leaned against the car and ate several, just enjoying the evening. I told them we needed to go because I had to milk cows at 5:30 a.m. Before getting back in the car, we launched a couple of half-eaten apples at the tin roof of the nearest outbuilding. It made a fun bang as they hit the tin roof, but caused no damage. We then got in the car, and as we were driving off, noticed a pair of car lights come on and came zooming towards us. We were a little alarmed that we had awakened the farmer and frustrated him. He came racing after us down the country road and hit the rear bumper of Richard's Volkswagen. He bumped it twice, trying to have us pull over. We then increased his frustration when I threw my half-eaten apple back at his car as it approached to bump us again. He quickly drove around us. The Volkswagen was much slower than the farmer's new Ford station wagon and got in front of us, then slowed us down to a stop. At this point, we decided to just let him take his anger out on us and then drive to my house. As he opened his driver's side door and got out, he then reached back in and pulled out his shotgun. To our surprise and alarm, I yelled at Richard to go, he has a gun. Richard floored the gas pedal and flooded the motor. It slowly chugged around the station wagon in front of us as it began to pick up speed. As we drove around his car, the farmer aimed his shotgun at the roof of the Volkswagen and pulled the trigger. There was a bright blue flash of light and the loud sound of gunfiring. I yelled to my friends, "He just shot at us." As we sped down the road as fast as the little Volkswagen could go, I began to feel something wet on the back of my shorts. I reached back with one hand to feel what it was and was shocked to discover it was blood. I then started to feel the 6 or 7 big bumps on my head and realized that the shot from the gun had gone through the vinyl sunroof and hit me in the head. He then pulled us over by blocking the road in front of us. He aimed his gun at us and had us get out of the car and put our arms on the Volkswagen roof. As he shoved the barrel of the gun into my kidneys, lastly, he took Richard's keys out of the ignition and threw them out in the wheat field across the road and then drove off. So, now back to my father. When he learned what had happened, he contacted the local town cop and went with him to visit the farmer. I was a bit of a mischievous kid, and the town cop thought that maybe he could sweep it under the rug, hoping that I had learned my lesson. I was fine with that, but not Dad. The bishop next got involved and had us boys and my dad, the other two boys did not have a dad, meet with him at the church. He too wanted to forgive and forget, worried that the farmer was struggling to come to church and that this might keep him away forever. Dad became very stern as he looked at the bishop and said, "Bishop, this is not something that is settled in church. This man, in his anger, could have killed my boy and maybe one of the other two if his aim would have been a little bit of a different angle. I will contact the county attorney and press charges. This is serious." At that moment, even though I remember having no hard feelings at the time towards the farmer, I knew Dad was right. He always made me feel safe and protected. In the end, the farmer was prosecuted, and it was not easy for him. Incidentally, I forgave him and years later told him that I was very sorry, and we became friends. Also, he and my father were friends at the time and still remained friends through the years. My father was a good provider for his family. He was a hard-working dairyman and rancher. He was very respected in our community. I had many a farmer tell me how much they respected my dad and how he lived his life. Dad was president of the Montana Dairymen's Association and served 8 years as state representative in our Montana politics, and a bishop for years at the local Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He served on the Stake High Council for many years. I don't ever remember him sitting with us in church because of his calling and service. Because the stake was located in Missoula, his meetings were held there. I remember many a night as a young boy sitting with Mom watching through the front picture window at the car lights coming down from Ravalli Hill in St. Ignatius, thinking which one might be Dad's. She always waited up for him. Sometimes his meetings would be long and he wouldn't get home until 11 p.m. This is Dad as bishop with his counselors and clerks. Dad taught me how to be frugal. He always paid me and my 3 brothers well for work from the time we could lift a sprinkler pipe, buck bales, pick rock, help in spring branding, milk the cows, etc. He had a new brick home built for us when I was 12 years old. It is still beautiful to this day. He was also the most generous person I know. He was always giving or loaning money to farmers and people in the community going through a hard time or setback financially. I think of him many times as I try to be like him in so many ways. He was the epitome of a father's primary role, to provide, protect, and preside in every way. And then here it says, my wonderful dad on a horse. My mother was an angel in every way. She was the tender and understanding element in my life in my teenage years. It seemed she was always worrying over me alone because I was the only one of my siblings that gave her anything to worry about. For example, one evening while cruising Mission St. Ignatius Main Street, which consisted of starting at the high school and driving down Main Street, passing the malt shop and continuing across Mission Creek and out to the cemetery and then back to the high school, Mike Humphrey and I decided that we should drive to Parma, Idaho and visit our friend Stan Lee. His parents had decided to send him to live with relatives in Idaho to get away from the bad influences of certain people in St. Ignatius, i.e. Brad, Mike, Richard, and Danny. This was 400 miles away. We filled our Volkswagen up with gas and then stopped by our math teacher's house to tell him we wouldn't be in school for a couple of days because we were leaving on a road trip. We drove all night and got into Parma sometime in the morning. I was excited to be on my own and talking with Stan about how things were in Montana. Later in the afternoon, his aunt called Stan's mother to tell her some of his friends from St. Ignatius were here to see Stan. Stan's mom, in turn, called my mom to tell her that we were in Idaho seeing Stan. I started to worry about being gone, realized that it was not a good thing to just leave without telling anyone, other than the math teacher. So we headed home, again driving through the night. We had no money left and were running out of gas by the time we got to Solomon, Idaho. We drove around wondering how we were going to get home with an empty tank. I spotted a City of Salmon truck parked in a driveway. For some reason, it was running, but nobody was in it. I parked nearby and grabbed a gas can and hose that I kept in my Volkswagen, walked over to the running truck and siphoned my can full for the drive home. I remember thinking how I would send the City of Salmon some money when I got home. It took a little of the guilt away. We got home later in the morning, and having driven all night, I was exhausted and went into my bedroom and crawled into bed. Soon there was a gentle knock on my door. My mom came in and sat next to me on my bed. She just gently told me how worried sick she was and couldn't believe that I would just leave like that and not tell her or dad. I still remember thinking how thoughtless that was. Mom made me promise that I would never do that again. I was so independent and thoughtless in my youth, yet Mom was always so patient with me. That was just one example of her patience. She was so Christ-like in her living. Her children were everything to her. One interesting thing about my mom was that she was a true city girl living on a ranch in Derry in Montana. And the city girl in her never left. She had no interest in working outside, and Dad hadn't wanted her to either. He wanted a full-time homemaker and mom to his children. She was that and more. She went to the hairdresser once a week, always dressed the latest in style, and kept the house immaculate. With Dad being in the state legislature and president of the Montana Dairymen's Association, he always had visitors. When one came by to see him, Mom always invited them in and asked them if they wanted to see Dad, at the same time staring down at their feet. They would look at her, then down to their shoes, and then ask, "Would you like me to remove my shoes?" To which she would reply, "Would you please?" She never allowed shoes anywhere in the house except downstairs in the mudroom where we first walked in from the outside. To this day, I am uncomfortable wearing shoes in my house or anyone else's. When one of us kids had done something that deserved some punishment, she always, without exception, looked at us with that trying to be mad look and said, "Wait till your dad gets home." A couple times when we wouldn't relent on doing something that was knowingly out of line, she would grab the fly swatter and try to swat our behind, to which we would laugh hysterically. Like my darling Pat, most of the time, even the flies just flew away. This is a picture. It says, "My beautiful mom." And then Mom and Dad with their first two children, Dave and Brad. All right, that's it. Thanks.